Welcome back. Many thanks for staying with us on Daybreak. At this time, we want to get into the discussion on the war on graft, a topic I feel that we've been discussing for the better part of the year and, of course, previous years as well. And there's still so much to talk about, even as more revelations emerge. And just in reference to the front page of the Daily Nation and page 6 as well, two stories about allegations of graft, one from a Senate committee report and another in terms of investigations by the EACC. Of course, we're talking about the managed equipment services contract for counties, a project branded as a criminal enterprise designed to enrich individuals. But also, we know that EACC detectives spent about 7 hours at Kemsa yesterday, collected a lot of data, did a lot of interrogation, and of course, they have until next week. Remember, they were told within 21 days by President Uhuru Kenyatta to investigate and reveal their findings within that period. Let me just reintroduce my guests in case you just joined us. And of course, remember, you can weigh in on this conversation. Hashtag Daybreak 22422 at Wahiga Mwaura. We have Anthony Oluoch, MP Mathare, with us. We have Isaac Mwaura, nominated Senator, Cherotich Sei there, an active citizen, and Nelson Havi, the president of the Law Society of Kenya. And on this one, as we look at tracking COVID-19 billions and, of course, equipment to counties. Let me start with you, LSK President. And I want to refer to a tweet by Senior Counsel Ahmed Nasir Abdullahi, who has called for the LSK to carry out private prosecution if the government of Kenya, seems to do a cover-up in regards to the billions that could have been lost during this COVID-19 period. Your thoughts on that? Are you satisfied with what you're seeing so far in the war on graft in regards to that particular matter?
First and foremost, let me emphasize, it may now appear apparent that Kenya, especially through its leadership, did not make a proper diagnosis as to the extent of vulnerability of the country so far as the COVID pandemic is concerned. And they took advantage of that pandemic to plunder, steal, and pilfer. And where does the buck stop? The buck stops with President Uhuru Kenyatta. Why do I say so? I say so because in the month of May and June, we raised concern as to how these monies were being spent. And what did he say? He said, stop bickering. The monies allocated for COVID have been well spent. None has been stolen. An audit will be undertaken and we'll be able to show this to the public. When an investigative inquiry was undertaken by the Nation Media Group, what did we see? Theft of billions of Kenyan shillings. And what is the president doing about Mutahi Kagwe? Look, Mutahi Kagwe is an appointed cabinet secretary. He's supposed to be tried by the National Assembly and the Senate. And this is a court of public opinion. We do not require rules of evidence to convict you, as Don Corleone would have said. He's as guilty as everybody can see. Why is he still in office? Worse off, we have a situation whereby it is the President of the Republic of Kenya directing investigations. We're turning logic over its head. Unless and until they take responsibility, and the responsibility in this case will be for the president either to sack Mutahi Kagwe or for Parliament to impeach him and pass a vote of no confidence against him. This is why we must say, and we must say affirmatively, there is no war against corruption. And there is a high possibility that even the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, and to a large extent even Parliament itself, is trying to sanitize the theft of this money. And I agree with Senior Counsel Ahmed Nasir Abdullahi that this is a matter that as the Law Society of Kenya, we must take up and prosecute these individuals. From the top, but...
Okay, LSK President, thank you for that. And Cherotich, I'm coming to you shortly, but let me bring in Senator Mwaura just to get his thoughts on this. And a Twitter user has tweeted this morning in regards to the front page of one of the papers saying different corruption scandals, same faces, zero consequences. The faces you see in regards to corruption scandals are mere proxies, special purpose vehicles. Senator Mwaura, you've heard what the LSK president has said. He's talked about no on corruption. He's calling for the resignation or the sacking of high-ranking officials in the Ministry of Health. Your thoughts on where we are as a country in regards to this? Are we doing things the right way? And your response to what the LSK president has said?
Yeah, I think, Wahiga, it's very clear that there is no proper, mechanism to stem impunity. It's one of the things that the BBI report actually identifies as a challenge of nationhood. And it actually still speaks to the issue of bad manners that we are seeing even in the last conversation that we just had of people abusing each other. It's like people asking, Utadu, what will you do? And I think when you look at issues to do with the law, people know that before you are convicted, it will take at least 2 years before you go around the courts and everything and all of that. And I think there is a power play between the courts, the media also, which sometimes also used to sanitize politicians. Some people appear on popular shows when they're under siege and then they get scot-free, they explain themselves out. Sometimes it's good to hear people, but sometimes it's actually choreographed. And then also further to that, when it comes to parliament, I mean, people are now becoming numb. They know it will be after this scandal. How many have we had, I mean, in the last 2 years? How many of them? But
Senator, if I can interrupt you, it's also said that parliamentarians themselves are beneficiaries of the gravy train from both sides of the political divide. I want you to talk about that as well as, you know, as much as you've talked about media sanitizing individuals, please.
Yes, because of the issue of rent-seeking and clientelism. Rent-seeking in the sense that, you know, people who are, for example, supposed to oversight those committees go to do business with the same committees they're supposed to oversight, the entities they're supposed to oversight, the ministries, departments, and agencies. That was one hand. And then clientelism is you find even, you know, lawyers, and it has happened a lot in the Senate, representing clients who are supposed to be superintended by the Senate itself. I mean, I don't want to mention names, but that is actually on record. So that conflict of interest where you don't really have separation of powers, and it's even spoken very clearly, and I think in Article 171 of the Constitution, where you have a practicing lawyer can also be a member of the JSC, you know, that in itself is a conflict of interest. So what are we saying? We are seeing a situation where our country has gotten into this culture of impunity, where you know you've made a lot of money out of government. The next time, these COVID-19 millionaires and the previous ones are going to win seats in the next election because then they will be in parliament. I mean, you saw the cases of people who are today in parliament, who are now governors, who are now women reps, who are now MPs. But when you look back, you see that they were actually involved in scandals as heads of parastatals, as heads of the institutions of government. So yes, I agree with you, Wahiga Mwaura. There is all those issues to do with ourselves as members of parliament. There are issues to do with the media, and of course, most importantly, and I must emphasize this, the courts. Recently, though, I think there is a breath of fresh air from judges such as Mumbi Ngugi. You've seen the kind of rulings that she has made with regard to the Ngiritas. And that tells us that they still hope, that they are still do-gooders, they are still good men and women, because the integrity of a nation is anchored upon our individual integrity. There are not two ways about it. It's not about legalism, it's not about the coding, it's not about, you cannot legislate character, for example, but it's about how people feel, you know, attuned and loyal, and indeed, you know, beholden to ensuring that we build a working nation. That is really a call on each and everyone's personal conscience.
Okay. Senator, let me get a reaction from Cherotich Sei on this. And Cherotich, I know you've been closely following and tweeting about the revelations regarding the Managed Equipment Services Scheme. It was meant to increase and improve medical facilities across the country. Remember, we're still focusing on the Ministry of Health. But the committee established that the project was, in their words, a criminal enterprise shrouded in opaque procurement processes. What should Kenyans be taking note of today, even with those revelations, Cherotich?
Yeah, thank you, Wahiga. You know, I spent a number of hours yesterday very horrified going through this 345-page document, just trying to see the anatomy of white-collar criminality in Kenya. And the question I ask myself is, why is it that at this particular moment, the Senate committee has finally finalized a report about something that has been in the offing for 5 years? I remember earlier on this year criticizing the Senate Committee on Health and saying that, and asking, is it that they had received brown envelopes and this is why they were unable to move forward? If anything, they seemed to be quite complimentary when it came to the MESS program, and almost like nothing was wrong. And at that moment, the former CS Health was appearing before them, there are all kinds of other individuals. But somehow it picked up pace in the past couple of months. And here we have this extremely detailed report. The question I ask is why? Why are we being fed this report at this particular time? Now, if I become a little bit historical,
are you trying to suggest that the smoke screen, smoke and mirrors? Are we being is our focus being turned away from something else? Is that your thinking? I just want to clarify that.
Not so much Wahiga, but rather to say that when we're being given this level of information, and there is a lot of information, complete with indictment, so to speak, by the committee on the actions of certain individuals, be it James Macharia, who was the then CS, or Dr. Nicholas Moragori, who was the then Director of Medical Services and then became the PS Health. They have been very clear. They have talked about who was derelict in their duty, where almost the conflict of interest, for example, between the IKM law firm colluding with Ministry of Health to put pressure on the Attorney General, on the National Treasury. I mean, it's very explicit. And the best way to keep a populace calm is to give them the truth. And so we have been fed truth. It is the timing of the truth that I am wondering about. If we talk about billions that have been stolen, and indeed they have, because if you're buying a linen trolley for 306,000 shillings, that's a price of a Vitz, a brand new Vitz, and we're saying that's a cost of a linen trolley. So when you see that money has been stolen, more so that the counties have suffered incredibly because these billions of shillings that went into this medical equipment service were never, even though they went through county revenue, were actually directly disbursed by Ministry of Health. So it is true what we are seeing there, but where is the money? You see, when I talk about corruption, we're talking about investigation, we're talking about prosecution, we're talking about finding for or against, we're talking about incarceration, we're talking about restitution, we're talking about repatriation of the funds wherever they have gone. Are we being fed this story now because every single contractor, subcontractor, and Megascope is also there, by the way, in the mess scandal that we are reading about now? Are we being fed this information because people have already been forewarned and therefore forearmed and ready with their legal teams to defend themselves tooth and nail? Go back to the Nyanja report linked to energy in 2003 that Gishuru, the then MD, stepped down MD, suppressed. That report would have started to unpick the rot, for example, that sits in Kenya Power, where today we see 150 billion shillings have been stolen from it. So every single place you go, every ministry you go, where there's a department, there's an agency, there's a history of millions and billions and trillions of shillings. And why I say, and I agree, there's no war on corruption, is because when we ask for action, there is no action. And when we don't ask for action per se, or when we're talking now about KEMSA and COVID millionaires, we suddenly receive this report. So we have to be very alert, but I'll be watching to see who actually gets picked up. And the recommendations that came from the committee were not very strong. They said, oh yes, we must follow the constitution. Oh yes, we must investigate. Oh yes, EACC should look into. There is nothing definite, for example, about the immediate censuring, the immediate stepping down, for example, of those who are known to have been front and center of the mess scandal. In this case, Moraguri or James Macharia. They're still sitting in office. Nothing will happen to them. So it's weak. It is recommendations. And sorry, Wahiga, just this
briefly,
last thing
please.
that I want to say.
Okay.
Sorry. In terms of the constitution, we are talking about changing it, BBI and so on and so forth. Every single thing in the MESS report speaks to the fact that there is no respect for the constitution when it comes to public procurement, when it comes to devolution. So why are we trying to change a constitution that we are even unable to respect in its form right now? But sorry, I will stop. I know I overran my time. Sorry, Wahiga.
Thank you. Let me get a quick reaction from Honorable Oluoch. He can also talk about changing the constitution. It's something that his party has been championing. But Honorable Oluoch, some say the ODM of yesteryears would have been very busy in a year like this, holding daily press conferences to condemn corruption. But the ODM that we see nowadays, seems markedly different. You know, for example, that Senate committee report, one would expect ODM to quickly issue a statement talking about justice must be done, you know, the report must be followed up, prosecution, etc. You know, when can we expect to see this from the ODM party? And you know, do you agree with those who feel that ODM's focus nowadays is very different from the ODM of the past couple of years?
It's a change of strategy, Wahiga. The ultimate goal is the same. I think ODM has gone more in terms of being able to work quietly behind in terms of the committees in Parliament. Remember, this is a misconception about the 2010 Constitution that oversight belongs to the opposition alone. And Kenyans must thank, of course, the opposition, ODM, and the Right Honorable for playing the role that they did. But that doesn't mean that the role of oversighting and of keeping the government on toes and unearthing corruption is a preserve of a certain section. The Constitution as crafted anticipates or contemplates a situation in which all work of Parliament and in terms of keeping check is done, the bulwark of it, at the committee level. And as ODM, we are focused on this. We have very good legislators in the Committee of Health, including Dr. Nikal and other people, working very furiously to unearth this thing. There is, of course, the Senate committee that is also working. Having said that, in terms of the change of the Constitution, I think one of the things we will have to grapple with and strike a fine balance of is what do we do with health as a devolved function when the national government continues to resist the decentralization of monies that are supposed to go to health, and at the same time micromanaging counties to the extent that you have these scandals about the health leasing equipment. I think that is one of the things we will have to deal with. There has been an agitation under the BBI framework that perhaps health shouldn't have been decentralized, but this is to the extent of the human resource and the personnel, and I agree with that. But I think we will have to deal squarely with the elephant in the house about retention of resources belonging to devolved functions and belonging to counties, because this seems to be the breeding ground for a lot of corruption, and you can understand why then the government and people in central government, Treasury, and the Minister of Health wants to do this. The result is what you're seeing at KEMSA. The result is what you've seen before about the health leasing equipment, and I think that this is something that we're going to have to look at. But there are two things in conclusion that I want to say that we must not lose focus on. Two important developments that I think if we stay the course could help us in the fight against corruption. One of them is a decision about the maize supply scandal, in which a very revolutionary decision was made in terms of prosecution. And we have seen that going down on record in one of the things that we will take down to history. And I think Mumbiguzi's decision in relation to two counties, High Court decisions, I think you have the Waititu decision, and I think one recently about the Obado decision, which touches on the ability of governors who have been cited for corruption to stay away from office. I think these are things that are important, and we need to celebrate some of the good things as we ask the institutions to tighten the areas that we still need to tighten.
Fair enough. Thank you so much. Let me bring in President Harvey to also get his thoughts on Uhuru's order to have tenders and procurement at KEMSA published online for transparency. But the wider picture is, as a nation, what lessons have we learned about how to ring-fence large projects? Just yesterday in the news here on Citizen TV, I watched a story about the government seeking investors for a gold mining project in Kakamega. We know there are projects that are being worked on, like the digital license plates for vehicles, which Okia Mtata has moved to court about. What lessons should we have learned? Have we learned them about how to ring fence large projects with infrastructure of a different nature, so that we don't keep having the discussions that we are having today?
I'm sorry to report that there is no honesty on the part of President Uhuru Kenyatta as far as his directive for the publicization of the KEMSA contracts is concerned. Could he also, in the same breath, direct the publicization of the SGR contracts, the Tano contracts, the Uhuru Highway Superhighway contract? Look, as Say has just said a few minutes ago, there is this tendency to appease the people every time they come up with a genuine grievance. And that's what we're facing. And I must emphasize what I stated much earlier. We pointed out this transgression as early as May and June and said, could you please put in the open the manner in which these funds are being given either by donors or borrowers, so that we're able to evaluate in good time, in order that we don't lose money as we've done before. Fast forward, what has he done in the recent past? As we speak right now, the President of the Republic of Kenya has started the amalgamation of Kenya Ports Authority, Kenya Pipeline, Kenya Railways Authority, through an entity called ICDC. All this is being undertaken in contravention of the Constitution, in contravention of the statute. What is more, he's purported to send Kenya Meats Commission to the Ministry of Defense. This is procurement. These are public entities. These are public funds. One cannot be directing the heightened war against corruption, yet he is the one sanctioning these things. It's as simple as that, Wahiga. There is no war against corruption. It's sanitization.
My goodness. Senator Mwaura, what are your thoughts on this? You're a member of the Jubilee Party. You've had some of the concerns of the other panelists this morning. Are they concerns you share? Are those concerns that, you who has access to the president could share with him, with those around him, that certain things, don't look procedural, don't look constitutional? What's your take?
I think, Wahiga Mwaura, my namesake, I actually asked a question way back after we had this revelation of teas costing millions of shillings and papers and photocopies. By the way, when I asked for that statement, there was no comment of the floor of the House, because I think it was not expected of somebody like myself to ask that question. And I think that is where the problem is, because when we are in Parliament, we oversight the executive. We do not oversight our political parties, because we do not. We are not supposed to accede to that. But there's a serious issue, and we can discuss that at a later debate about our institutional designs, which then therefore become, an antithesis to the very oversight that is supposed to be done. Now, if we had actually dealt with that issue of when we had the first scandal, I think we would have made a difference. And secondly, by the way, I've just stepped down as the Vice Chairman of Finance and Budget Committee of Senate, and one of the things that was very strange is to realize that the medical leasing equipment, Wahiga, initially was supposed to be 4.7 billion with a contract of 7 years. But around 2018, I saw a variance where the monies were actually increased to 6.1 billion. And when we questioned that under the Division of Revenue Bill, then we were told it was an error. An error of about nearly 3 billion, really, honestly. And going further, if you look at the allocation in the Ministry of Health currently, it is a whopping 97 billion. Now, that is equal to 16 counties' allocation. And that is why these lots of money are there to be stolen. Because why would you, for example, want to lease equipment for counties? Is that they cannot procure for themselves? We've seen recently with the innovation, because the necessity is the mother of invention, people even making hospital beds. You saw Kenyatta University inventing, ventilators. But then people would rather engage in the economics of entrepreneurship, you see? And that is what we are looking at. So yes, what am I trying to say? If you look at our debt ceiling, and we must speak about this, it has been gobbled up by these mega projects that are nothing more than development corruption, where the net profit is not out of hard labor, but because of mechanics of wheeler dealing and dealership, So that is something that cannot be the stand of Jubilee. Jubilee cannot stand for that. People must be held culpable, and they must be held to account on an individual basis. Why am I saying so? Because, on one hand, if you look at the money that we have borrowed for the last 7 years, it's 4.7 trillion shillings. And I think that money, has it actually given value for Kenyans? So that must be looked at. I think, personally, we are facing a serious challenge of cartels. And you are likely to see more of these grand hastes, as we move forward towards a general election. Why? Because number one, people are looking for money to campaign. People are also looking for money to retain power. and people are looking for money to cushion themselves when they lose power. You see? So it's becoming a culture, and it is not just going to happen at the national level. Senate also oversights counties. We're also going to see more of that at the counties level. We realized, for example, that just before the last general election, governors were wont to giving roadside declaration and contracts in marketplaces and such to occasion, pending bills that ran up to nearly 100 billion. Actually, it was precisely 98 billion. So that is becoming a norm in this country. It is not really acceptable. I believe that to a certain degree, and it must be commendable.
Okay.
The work of the EACC has quite improved in terms of netting, but I just had a meeting with them sometimes back as a secretary for APNAC. Honorable Watch is also a member.
Okay.
And they expressed their frustration the same on why they don't do their work very well. We've seen a lot of improvement on how DPP is working. You've seen how the DCI has actually overshadowed the police in terms of how they're supposed to work. Yet, actually, somebody has rushed to court to say that, DCI is usurping powers from the police.
Okay.
Again, still trying to do away with the otherness that comes with the improved working conditions of Kinoti. But also further, and I want to really reiterate, we are seeing very progressive judges led by Mombi Ngugi, or even the case of Waluke, for example, making judgments that are really progressive in nature. So what am I trying to say? I think
briefly, please, Senator.
Okay. You and I and everybody on this panel, we only have a one mouth, 2 ears, and 2 hands. We cannot delegate the role of fighting corruption to one individual. It is a collective action, and that does not mean nobody there must do it. We've got to create a chain of people who then ensure that there are not these slippages and leakages, and that actually there is no miscarriage of justice. That, for me, I think is my take. But not to say it's Jubilee Party or this and that. Of course, ODM now cannot be seen to be fighting the handshake through constant engagement with government. But why is it, therefore, has there not been other new voices who have come to take up that space that has been left by ODM, if you like?
Okay, thank you for that. I know I'm sure Cherotich wants to respond to that, and of course you've mentioned ODM, Honorable Watch as well, but I've been informed we have to take a break, and it's going to be a quick one. So let's do that. When we come back, Cherotich and Honorable Watch, I'll give you a chance to respond to what the other panelists have said and also give us your views on the same. My goodness, what a discussion. You're watching Daybreak. Stay with us. I'm seeing your feedback, and I'll read some of them on the other side of this break, but we'll be right back.